The Reward of Faith, an inspiring story of faith, kindness, and redemption. A day like any other. The sun was just beginning to rise on the horizon when Elena put on her apron and prepared for another long shift at La Buena Mesa, a restaurant from a well-known chain. Like every morning, she entrusted herself to God with a short prayer as she tied her hair into a ponytail. Lord, give me strength for this day. Help me serve with love. Even when my heart is weary, she whispered with closed eyes before stepping into the dining area. The job was tough but necessary. Since her mother fell ill, Elena had taken on the responsibility of supporting her household and caring for her younger brother, Samuel. Her salary barely covered the bills, and the debts kept piling up, but she trusted that God would provide. That morning, the restaurant was particularly busy. Customers came and went, some kind, others impatient. Elena smiled and served diligently, doing her best to keep up with the pace. That's when she saw him. A disheveled man entered the restaurant. His clothes were worn, and his face showed the weight of fatigue and hunger. He slowly approached the counter, looking at the menu with longing eyes. Elena felt a knot in her heart. She knew what it was like to go hungry. She knew what it was like to not have enough. "Excuse me, miss, could you give me something to eat? I don't have any money, but I haven't eaten in days," the man said with a hoarse voice. Elena quickly glanced toward the kitchen, where the manager, Mr. Ramirez, supervised everything with a stern look. The restaurant's policy was strict: no free food. Elena felt conflicted. She knew that helping him could get her in trouble, but she also knew that she couldn't ignore his need. She looked at her own wallet. She barely had enough to make it to the end of the month, but wasn't it her faith in God that guided her to help others? She took a deep breath and made a decision. "I'll bring you something," she said softly, with a kind smile. The man looked at her in surprise, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Elena wrote down a full breakfast order and, without anyone noticing, paid for it with her own wages. When she served him the hot meal, the man's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you, miss," he whispered with gratitude. Elena felt a deep peace in her heart. She had no idea that this simple act would change her life forever. Unexpected consequences. Elena continued her shift, feeling a mix of satisfaction and concern. She knew she had done the right thing by helping the man in need, but she was also aware that Mr. Ramirez wouldn't overlook her decision. By mid-morning, the manager approached her with a severe expression. "Elena, I need to speak with you in my office," he ordered in an authoritative tone. Elena's heart pounded as she followed him. Once inside the office, the manager closed the door and stared at her. "I reviewed the accounts and noticed that a breakfast was charged without the customer paying. Can you explain what happened?" Ramirez asked harshly. Elena took a deep breath and calmly replied, "Yes, Mr. Ramirez. A homeless man came into the restaurant. He hadn't eaten in days and had no money. I couldn't let him leave hungry, so I decided to pay for his meal with my own money." The manager's face hardened. "You know, it's against the rules to give out free food. Even though you paid for it yourself, you're still breaking company policy. This restaurant is not a charity," he said coldly. Elena felt a lump in her throat, but she refused to be intimidated. "I understand the rules, sir, but I also believe that everyone deserves a little compassion. God teaches us to help those in need," she responded firmly. Ramirez sighed and shook his head. "You're a good worker, Elena, but I can't overlook this. I'll have to deduct the cost of that breakfast from your next paycheck. And if this happens again, you could lose your job." Elena nodded silently, feeling a pang of anxiety. She knew that every penny counted, but she didn't regret her decision. As she left the office, she prayed in her heart, "Lord, give me the strength to keep trusting in you, When she returned to the dining area, she noticed that the homeless man was gone. She wondered if she would ever see him again, unaware that this encounter would be the start of an unexpected turn in her life. An unexpected message. Elena tried to focus on her work for the rest of the day, but the worry didn't leave her. Her salary was already tight, and any deduction meant more hardship for her family. However, she clung to her faith and kept repeating to herself, "God will provide." That night, when she got home, she found her mother, Rosa, sitting in the living room with a weary expression. "How was your day, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Elena smiled and sat beside her. "It was tough, Mom, but God always has a plan," she replied, avoiding worrying her with the details. The next morning, when Elena arrived at the restaurant, an envelope with her name on it was waiting at the counter. With trembling hands, she opened it and read the note inside. "Miss Elena, your act of kindness has not gone unnoticed. We would like to speak with you. Please come to the head office of the restaurant chain tomorrow at 10 a.m. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. Who could have sent her this note? Had she made another mistake without realizing it? With a racing heart, she prayed silently, trusting that God would guide her. That night, she could hardly sleep. 1,000 thoughts swirled in her mind. Finally, dawn arrived, and after saying goodbye to her mother and brother, she set off for the address given in the note. When she arrived at the impressive headquarters of the restaurant chain, an assistant led her to an elegant meeting room. Minutes later, the door opened, and a well-dressed man walked in. To her surprise, it was the same homeless man she had helped days before. Elena was speechless as the man smiled kindly and extended his hand. "Miss Elena, my name is Alejandro Montiel. I am the owner of this restaurant chain, and I have much to thank you for." The true test. Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. She stared at the man in front of her, trying to process his words. How could this be possible? The owner of the entire restaurant chain was the same hungry man she had helped? Alejandro Montiel gestured for her to take a seat and sat across from her. "I know this must be a surprise to you, but I needed to see it with my own eyes." He began with a calm expression. "Some time ago, I decided to visit my own restaurants disguised as someone in need. I wanted to see what kind of people I had on my team and how they treated those who had the least." Elena lowered her gaze. "I only did what I felt in my heart. I couldn't let you go hungry," she said softly. Alejandro smiled warmly. "And that's why you're here. Very few had the courage to act with compassion, and you not only gave me a plate of food, but you paid for it with your own salary, even while facing personal difficulties. That says a lot about your character." Elena felt her eyes well up with tears. "I trust in God. I've always believed that He calls us to help others, even when we don't have much ourselves." Alejandro nodded, impressed by her sincerity. "It's precisely that faith and that kind heart that led me to make a decision," he said, pulling a document from his briefcase. "I want to offer you a position at the corporate office, a job with a better salary, stability, and opportunities for growth. Your kindness should not go unnoticed." Elena covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed with emotion. "I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever imagined." Alejandro looked at her seriously. "I only ask one thing in return, that you never lose the faith that led you to help me that day." Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks. She looked up at the sky and whispered a prayer of gratitude. God had truly heard her cry. A new beginning. Elena left the office with her heart racing. She could hardly believe what had just happened. God had worked in a way she never could have imagined. As she walked through the streets toward home, she felt a deep peace. She knew her life was about to change. When she arrived, her mother greeted her with a tired smile. "Daughter, how did it go?" she asked gently. Elena took her mother's hands and looked at her with excitement. "Mom, God has answered our prayers. They offered me a new job at the corporate office. A better salary, stability. We'll be able to pay off our debts and buy your medicine without worry." Tears filled Rose's eyes. "God is good, daughter. He never abandons us." Samuel, her younger brother, jumped with joy. "I knew God would do something amazing," he exclaimed, hugging Elena tightly. That night, as they prayed together as a family, Elena felt a renewed certainty in her heart. Her faith had been tested, and God had rewarded her abundantly. The next day, she arrived at the corporate office for her first day of work. Alejandro Montiel greeted her with a smile and introduced her to the team. "Elena, I'm sure you'll do a great job here. But beyond that, I want you to always remember what brought you to this place. Your faith and your compassion." Months passed, and Elena's life changed dramatically. Not only was she able to help her family, but she also became involved in charitable work, helping others who faced the same struggles she had once endured. Her story became a powerful testimony of faith and kindness. One day, while serving food at a community kitchen, an elderly woman took her hands and said, "God places the right people in the right place. Never stop helping others because the love you give always comes back multiplied." Elena smiled, remembering how it all began. Her heart overflowed with gratitude. She had learned that when you trust in God and follow His call, blessings come at the perfect time. And so, with her faith stronger than ever, she moved forward, trusting that God still had many wonderful plans for her life. Trials and purpose. The first few months at the corporate office were a challenge for Elena. Although she had a better salary and stability, the work was demanding, and she often felt overwhelmed. However, every day before starting her shift, she prayed, asking God for wisdom and strength. One day, as she was organizing documents in her office, Alejandro Montiel walked in with a serious expression. "Elena, I need your help with something important," he said, taking a seat in front of her. "Of course, Mr. Montiel. What is it about?" Elena replied with curiosity. Alejandro sighed. "I'm thinking of launching a program to help homeless people. After my experience on the streets, I realized that our company can do much more than just sell food. I want you to be part of this project." Elena felt her heart fill with excitement. "That's incredible. I've always believed that God calls us to help others. How can I contribute?" Alejandro smiled. "I want you to lead the initiative. I know you have the heart and the faith to do it. We will set up free meal programs in some of our locations and also provide job training for people experiencing homelessness." Elena felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. She never imagined that God would place her in a position to do so much good. "I accept with all my heart," she said firmly. The project began with great effort and dedication. Elena worked tirelessly, ensuring that each meal program was well organized and that people received not only food but also words of hope and encouragement. Over time, she saw many lives change. People who once lived on the streets now had jobs, dignity, and a new chance at life. Each story of transformation reminded her of the moment she had chosen to pay for that breakfast for Alejandro without knowing who he was. One night, as she walked through one of the newly opened meal centers, she saw a young man sitting at a table, looking sad. She approached him and offered a warm smile. "God has a purpose for you. No matter how difficult the road is, He never abandons you." The young man looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Thank you. I don't remember the last time someone believed in me." Elena gently took his hand. "God always believes in you, and so do I." In that moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. God had turned her act of kindness into a life purpose, and she was ready to follow that calling forever. Blessings amid adversity. The work in the community kitchens continued to grow, and more people benefited from the initiative each day. Elena felt she was fulfilling the mission God had placed in her life. However, it wasn't always easy. Some people within the company viewed the project with skepticism. "This is an unnecessary expense," some executives murmured. "Our company is a business, not a charity organization." One day, Alejandro called Elena into his office. "We have a problem," he said with a worried expression. "Some investors believe the program is affecting our finances. They want to cancel it." Elena felt a knot in her stomach. "But this has changed lives, Alejandro. We can't turn back now," she insisted firmly. Alejandro nodded. "I know, and I'm on your side. But we need to prove that this project not only helps people but also strengthens our company." That night, Elena knelt in her room and prayed with all her heart. "Lord, you open this path. Do not let it close. Give me the wisdom to defend this mission." The next day, she organized a meeting with the executives and presented data showing how the initiative had improved the company's image and increased customer loyalty. Additionally, she invited several people who had benefited from the program to share their testimonies. One by one, the testimonies moved those present. "Thanks to this program, I have a job and a new life," said a man who had once lived on the streets. "They didn't just give me food. They gave me hope." The investors, seeing the real impact of the project, began to reconsider their stance. Finally, Alejandro stood up and said with determination, "Our company is not just about profits. It's about people. And this is the right thing to do." Not only did the program continue, but it also expanded to other cities. Elena learned that when God places a mission in your life, He will always provide the means to carry it out, even in the face of adversity. One day, as she walked through one of the kitchens, an elderly woman stopped her and said, "When you follow God, He opens paths where there were none before." Elena smiled and nodded. "And I will always follow Him,"